Good afternoon, everybody. A very, very warm welcome to today's webinar, Taking the Grief Out of Grievance. Something I know a great many of you are very interested in, clearly from the number of people who've registered for the webinar and are still joining us this morning, or this afternoon, should I say. Something which is very important to people is how do we deal with some of the difficult stuff in our organisations when people start to fall out, disagree, not seeing eye to eye, complaints, perhaps division, schisms,
correct,
team breakdown. So the language becomes a little harder,
yes,
Bola, as the conflicts become more entrenched. Bullying, harassment, discrimination, sickness, poor productivity, team division, team dysfunction.
Yes,
and it goes on. It gets worse.
Oh, no, I know it goes.
It gets worse, and of course our policies are invoked. HR try and come in and do something. People go off sick. And we start to see the language of the conflict becomes much more serious. Litigation, tribunals, settlement agreements, COP3s, money, more time, more money, more time, more money, more time, more money.
Yes.
And of course, what happens in a great many organisations is that at that point of the conflict, where it's a significant cost to the business in both time and money, that we see the greatest investment being made. And today's webinar is going to be arguing passionately that the best way to resolve conflicts is at the earliest possible stage. But what I'm going to be arguing today is that the policy that we have in our organisations that's designed to resolve the issues is actually acting as a barrier and a blockage. And instead of a policy of dispute resolution, what we have in our organisations is a policy of dispute escalation. And that the grievance procedure, subconsciously or unconsciously, is worsening the situation. It's making matters worse. It's causing the parties to become polarised and entrenched. It's damaging relationships. The grievance procedure, in my view, is one of the most pernicious and damaging aspects of the modern business. Does it help us resolve the stuff that's on the screen in front of us? No, it doesn't. Does it make matters much worse and cause high levels of dissatisfaction, grief, discord? Yes. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So today's webinar is something which I know is very important to people because conflict is ubiquitous. We are going to experience conflict in our businesses. In fact, as someone who has over 25 years of working with conflict, I welcome conflict with open arms. And I know an increasing number of organisations are doing so because if we can manage, emphasis being on the word manage, if we can manage the conflict effectively, we can secure lasting outcomes, drive innovation and bring people together. But the grievance procedure, because of it being a dispute escalation procedure, is also about minimising risk to the organisation of the damage caused by conflict. And it's actually impeding the opportunity for people to come together, to grow, to work their issues through and to find innovative solutions. And if it's not just the word grievance, it strikes fear into the heart of so many people. It's like a sword of Damocles that hangs over our heads. I'll take a grievance out against you. Our relationship will never, ever, ever be the same again. And this procedure, which was designed in the 1970s to sort of offset the power and authority that was with the employer through the disciplinary procedure, which absolutely was right, was about protecting and safeguarding the needs of our employees to be able to bring issues of concern, contractual matters and other matters in front of their employer. It hasn't kept up with the modern organisation. And what happens now is the grievance procedure is used to address issues of perceived behaviour or breakdown or misbehaviour or misconduct on the part of a colleague or a manager. It was never designed to deal with that issue. The grievance procedure is not fit for purpose. Yeah, we have it in our organisation as though, as I said in an article, it has some sort of ethereal power. We have to have it. We don't have to have it. So today's webinar is going to address some of these very topical and real challenges, which I know are on the minds of a great many human resources, employee relations, industrial relations professionals. And also I was delighted to see so many learning and development professionals on this webinar today, because there's an increase in recognition that actually to move away from a culture of grievance and adversarial sanction-based approaches, we actually need to think about the role that our leaders and managers are playing. Thinking about the competencies, the behaviours, the capacity, the confidence, the quality of our managers to promote an environment where conflict can be managed effectively. And the overarching message for today will be, firstly, let's take our grievance procedures en masse to the best place we can do, the shredding machine. Secondly, let's replace them with something a little bit more innovative and creative, a resolution policy. And thirdly, the key message is going to be, how do we focus on the triumvirate of HR, managers and unions so that those three key players can work together to create the kind of culture that gets people talking, gets people working their issues through, and promotes a culture of cooperative, collaborative problem solving. Wow.
That's it.
And when we can get to that place, amazing things can happen.
Very true.
And it's not just in the abstract. Royal Mail are doing this. Parcel Force are doing this. Lloyds Bank are doing this. Massive hotels are doing this.
Yeah.
Huge hospitals, universities, they're all doing this right now. It's happening right now. The resolution revolution has begun.
Yes.
And organisations are shredding. In fact, I can hear a shredding machine now as another grievance procedure is shredded. And as I say in my article, they make great bedding for hamsters and other soft, furry animals. It's about how much value I place on the modern grievance procedure. So I'm David Little, I'm the CEO of the TCM Group. I set the organisation up back in 2001, so we're by a long shot the largest and most well-established of the mediation and dispute resolution providers here in the UK. My background was originally in race and community relations and community engagement. I ran a large charity promoting mediation in schools, in prisons, in community disputes, often very complex community disputes. I set up a program called CRISP, the Conflict Resolution in Schools program, tackling bullying in the playground and in the classroom. And for the last 15 years, which if I say it quickly doesn't sound so long, I've been working with organisations to help them create a culture which is mediation friendly, where getting in a room and talking with each other is no longer frowned upon as some sort of a weird, sort of strange thing that we might do on the off chance that we feel in the mood. It's normalising getting in a room, because I believe passionately that the best way to resolve any conflict is by sitting down and doing two amazing things: talking and listening. And if we as mediators, managers, HR professionals and others, and within our organisations, can create the culture and the conditions where people can talk and listen, I will guarantee to you, and the evidence is now stacking up in favour, in support of this, that your grievances, the low satisfaction, the low engagement, productivity issues, attendance issues, absence issues, whatever it is you're dealing with right now, almost overnight can be resolved by talking and listening. Bola, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi guys, my name is Bola Ogini and I'm Senior Resolution Consultant within the organization here. I have a passion also to see a lot of people come out from conflict where they can make the most of their potential at whatever they're doing in life. I have a passion to see people, like David said earlier on, come together, be able to sit down, talk and listen, and have a constructive adult-to-adult discussion where they can then see how they can resolve whatever is going on between them. And this is very important in our workforce today. People are screaming and they are hungry to kind of move away from grievances where they can then make the most of everything they want to enjoy about work. Everyone has got something unique and important about them that they really want to benefit from. So if we can make the most of it through people coming together, sitting down, talking and listening, I mean, at the end of the day, like David said, we'll have a better workforce. It's going to be more productive. It's going to be more efficient.
Absolutely. Bola, thank you. So today we're going to explore these issues and these topics. We're going to look at conflict, how it comes about, why it happens, and how to resolve it. So the webinar is going to last around about 45 minutes. It is being recorded and it will be transcribed, and we'll also put the link up onto YouTube. So it's there. You can share it, you can view it again, listen to some of the topics again, as I've said, in your own time. There'll be two polls, so please do look out for those. I'll mention them when they come up. I'll be interested to know your thoughts on a couple of topics in relation to grievance. And there's an opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar. In fact, we'll do everything that we can in order to be able to answer your questions. If we get overwhelmed with questions, Bola, then what we'll do is we'll record a little podcast after the webinar, and we'll send that out to you. So we'll unless of course some of you wish to stay on and listen to the podcast. So once the webinar is finished at 1:15, we'll then carry on with a recorded podcast. And for those of you who need to be away, you can then listen to that in your own time. You'll see in the console in front of you, that's where the panel is for asking questions. I've also put 3 PDF documents in there. I sent a copy of the model resolution policy out to all of the delegates, but I know some people are still registering quite late on. If you haven't got it, that policy is available for you to download free of charge through the console. The slide deck from today's slides is also in the console, and you will also be able to find an article which was published recently in HR Grapevine magazine, in fact in the February edition, again touching on some of the topics that we're going to be talking about through today. So please, if you've got some sandwiches, enjoy your sandwiches, sit back, relax, enjoy. I hope that you find something useful from today. Today we are about challenging people's mindsets.
That's it.
We have become, I don't know what the problem has been, but we sort of accept the status quo. But when I speak to HR, I was talking to an HR professional in a large bank yesterday, and she was saying, do you know something, David? We haven't even talked about this in our organisation. And the light bulb came on above our head saying, we need to have a conversation about this issue in our organisation because no one's talking about it. And I hope that through the course of today, what we do is we promote a conversation about conflict, a dialogue about disputes. And we might not have all of the right answers that are absolutely specific to your organisation, but what I hope we are able to do is give you some food for thought to go back and have a conversation. Is grievance right for our business, or is there another way? That's us. So we're an amazing little business. We empower people and organisations to adopt new approaches to dispute and complaints resolution, workplace relations, human resources and leadership development. Our emphasis is on protecting relationships while securing lasting and sustainable outcomes. We work in partnership with our customers to develop the core values, and this is really important, a whole systems, holistic model, the values, the systems, the processes, and the behaviours. We're going to talk about behaviours a lot today, which encourage cooperative problem solving, open dialogue and stakeholder engagement. We develop, and Bol is one of a team of consultants who develop and apply insightful teaching and consultancy methods which are accessible to all. And we're inspired by approaches such as positive psychology, principled negotiation and emotional intelligence, as we believe that these approaches are far more positive and encourage constructive resolution of business challenges, which in themselves are traditionally adversarial and challenging. So we bring something very new and very different, and we work with numerous organisations, which obviously we'll share some of that through the session. So what are the challenges that we'll address today? Well, why are more and more organisations rejecting grievance in favour of something a little bit new? And in one level, I've got a good friend at the CIPD, Johnny Gifford, and I remember him saying to me, David, is this not just a language exercise? Is this not just a rebrand of the grievance procedure? And I said to him, Johnny, conflict is all about language, how we perceive and receive language. And the word grievance, as we'll see, it brings about a perception of negativity, betrayal, hurt, and harm and fear. So on one level, it is about changing the vernacular from grievance to resolution. As soon as we start to go, so Lloyd's Banking Group, we're talking at a conference I'm organising next week. It's a great example, amongst many others, where you don't take out a grievance against a colleague, you request resolution. The request for resolution goes to HR, who assess it, and they have a series of interventions available to them, with the primary intervention being on mediation. It's aligned to their values, which is aligned to their core competences. It makes perfect sense. It's creating a culture of resolution, which is promoting the language, which changes the mindset.
That's it.
And that's what it's all about. So on one level, yes, it's a change of language, but it's also about a change of thinking and culture. And for those organisations of whom I'm sure many of you do subscribe to the principles of cooperative, collaborative problem solving, I'm yet to walk into an organisation, Bola, and see, you know, when you walk into the reception and see the values in the reception, they're stated. I'm yet to walk into the reception of one of my customers and the values stated are hurt, anger, vitriol, dogma, binary justice. There's not. The values about cooperation, excellence, respect, dignity, a customer service, empathy. These are the sort of values that we have.
Yes.
But the grievance procedure doesn't enshrine these values. In fact, it operates in complete opposition to the values. And the poor old HR professional is trying on one level to manage these progressive corporate values and have a voice at the board to generate strategy to actually espouse and deliver on these values. But on the other hand, they're the custodian of a policy framework which is acting in complete opposition to the stated values of the business. Goodness me, I'm even tired saying it. I look at HR teams and they are absolutely exhausted from this. This paradox that exists is not sustainable, it's not tenable. So we need to think differently about our policies. Do they truly reflect the values of our organisation? First challenge to those of you on this webinar today, take your grievance procedure out and with a red pen, mark all of the parts of your grievance procedure which act in opposition to your core values. And with a green pen, mark all the parts of your grievance procedure which operate in alignment and convergent with your values. And I'd be very interested to see what comes back. So we've had a question, Sophie, how does the alternative procedure fit in with the ACAS code of practice? Beautifully. ACAS are fully supporting the resolution policy, and as you'll see, the resolution policy enshrines all of the the policy, the ACAS code was written for businesses like mine employing 10, 15 employees. Larger organisations should have something which far exceeds the ACAS code. But if we're talking in particular about formal grievance or formal resolution meetings where an employee has the right to representation and the right to appeal at the end of it, absolutely. And I was presenting, actually, funnily enough, at an ACAS conference in Manchester a few weeks ago, and the support was absolutely palpable in the room. So ACAS are very supportive. In fact, one of their directors said at a conference last year, you can call your grievance procedure skipping through the meadow singing come by our procedure. As far as he was concerned, the Employment Tribunal and ACAS don't care what it's called, so long as you follow those minimum standards. And it doesn't matter whether those minimum standards sit at the front, the middle or the end of your procedure, as long as you follow the ACAS code. The real test in Employment Tribunal, of course, is have you followed your own policy and procedure? But of course, when I know a great many Employment Tribunal judges, of whom a number of them are consultants for me. And one of them said to me very interestingly the other day, if you bring a case in front of me into the Employment Tribunal and you haven't tried to mediate, I will stop the tribunal and go and mediate because she's a trained mediator. And so even if you get into the Employment Tribunal now, the chances are you're going to come up against the mediator who's sitting as a judge in the tribunal.
Exactly.
You can't avoid mediation anymore. It's not the UK's best kept secret anymore. It is now wholly and substantially integrated into our justice models. And it's time for the grievance procedure to catch up, because quite frankly, it's woefully out of date. So how are organisations demonstrating need? It's all well and good me saying all of this, yes, but where's the evidence? Sure. And we're going to talk about that today. And what role do the Holy Trinity or the triumvirate of managers, leaders, unions, HR professionals play in this resolution process? Each of them has a role, but in my experience is when we're working in grievance, each player is pulling in opposite directions, often with the best of intentions. But what the resolution policy does is it encourages the three players, the three key players, to pull together, to work in unity, in harmony, to create a culture of resolution. Yep. Wow, here they are, at it again.
Yes.
Bull, fight, scrap, struggle. And look what happens. I'm right, you're wrong, I win, you lose. It's all your fault, you're a bully, I don't trust you, don't blame me. Who do you think you are? I'll see you in court. That's the language of conflict in our organisations. No wonder people go off sick for days, weeks, months. No wonder people leave our businesses. No wonder people get fed up. No wonder people feel disengaged. No wonder people can't perform effectively. No wonder people are fed up. It's not right that we have this ultimate experience as soon as a problem occurs. It's binary. It splits us. I'm right, you're wrong, I win, you lose, I defend, you attack. Yes. That's the language of conflict in the modern organisation. And unless you're doing something very imaginative and creative, if you talk to the people experiencing conflict management, they're scared of this. And not only are they fearful of this, they know as soon as they get involved in this, that they're going to be involved for many weeks or months. In fact, I was doing a big pre-tribunal mediation the other week, and an investigation had been going on for over 3 years. They had a birthday party for the investigation. Wow. Well, not really a birthday party, bother, but you know, it felt like it's just unbelievable. 3 years.
It's unreal.
These people should be in a room resolving their issues, back to work, doing the job that they're employed to do, that they love doing.
Yes.
3 years of investigation, it tears the heart out of the business. It tears the heart out of the team. What a way to run an organisation. It's baffling. So conflict itself is a complex thing, and we've become obsessed about behaviour. And I know there's a number of lawyers on the webinar, so please, with the greatest respect to anyone from a legal background, the legal profession has instilled a culture of fear in our organisations and made us very risk averse. The good news is that there are a number of progressive lawyers out there who recognise that actually creating policies and procedures which prevent the risk of litigation isn't addressing the needs of the vast majority of the workforce. However, our policies, particularly grievance procedure, is written for the minimum, the minority of our employees who may wish to cause us harm or who have a legitimate case. The 99.9% of the workforce are not catered for in our grievance procedure. And as a mediator, I know behaviours are useful, but I don't apply sanctions, blame, evidence, corroboration, mitigation in order to be able to build a case on balance of probability to dismiss through mediation. No, no, no. What I'm interested in is what went wrong, why did it go wrong, what have you learned from it, and what can you do tomorrow to put it right again? And in so doing, what we can identify is what are your underlying needs and goals? What are your hopes and fears and aspirations? We know that the majority of conflicts are driven by loss, a perceived loss, an actual loss, or a fear of loss. Let me say that again, because it's very important. A perceived loss, an actual loss, or a fear of future loss. That is at the heart of every conflict that you will ever work with in your life. If we can understand what those three elements of loss are and help the parties to articulate them, then they can begin to build insight and resolution. But if that sense of loss isn't articulated, it drives these powerful emotional and psychological responses, often commonly known as the fight, flight, freeze, or fall response. For those of you psychologists, you'll know the amygdala, you'll know the release of the hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. You'll know that there's a very complex set of psychological and physiological reactions happening to conflict. Grievance procedures don't care about this. They're not interested in the psychological and emotional responses from the parties to a conflict. It's on the balance of probability. Did the behaviour, was it acceptable or not acceptable? Yeah. And that influences the actions and the interactions of the parties, which then impacts on the destructive behaviour. And unless we take full account of the entire spiral and cycle of conflict, we will forever be managing behaviour. And the message to me, to organisations, and I speak to people about the bad behaviours of their employees all the time, or their managers. If only they grow up, we wish we could bang heads together, so on and so forth. And I say to them very excitedly, you get the behaviours you deserve. Your policies, your procedures actually are encouraging people to behave badly. HR are not passive recipients of bad behaviour. We encourage the bad behaviour. And until organisations recognise that their own internal systems and processes and policies actually are advocating and encouraging bad behaviour, it will always be a blame game that's being played out. And for real change to happen, yes, our employees need to behave differently. Yes, our managers need to be better at having difficult conversations. But yes, HR professionals really need to take a long, hard look at the policy framework and the employee handbook and recognise that the first day that someone starts working in your business and opens the employee handbook, the first policy they see is how to take a grievance out against each other. The first thing we're saying to our new employees is, when all things go wrong, this is what you do. What kind of message are new people getting when they join us? So, a few thoughts in relation to conflict. So it's about helping us to change our thinking. Grievance procedures are formal, they're rights-based, they're combative, they're about winners and losers, sanctions and arguments. There's no place for this in the modern business. Yet it just sits there collecting digital dust, minding its own business as though it has an ethereal right to exist. It doesn't, it shouldn't, it has no place. Resolution is about a change in language towards a win-win outcome. Mutually agreeable outcomes based on our underlying interests and needs. Now, we have to work a bit harder to find out what those underlying interests and needs are. We can't passively hope people are going to tell us this because they're cross and upset. So we need to listen to people. We need to engage with people. We need to give people a chance to talk, to be heard, to be listened to. And often at the end of a mediation process, I'll say to the parties, you know, that you've reached an amazing outcome. What was different about the mediation that I've done vis-a-vis every other thing that's happened in your organisation? And they look me in the eye and say, David, you're the first person to have listened to us. I say, no, It's been going on for 3 years. Surely not. They say, David, you're the first person who sat down and listened to us without judging, without blaming.
That's it.
And I'm blown away because I don't have any amazing powers of listening that any of you on this webinar don't possess in spades. But why is it we leave common sense at the door of our organisations and we're not listening to people, we're not hearing them? And it's just making matters worse. And so when it goes wrong, this is what happens, uncertainty. It's all driven by loss. Again, for those of you interested in root cause, you've got Kubler-Ross griefs curve. You may be familiar with the change curve. Well, conflict's not very much different to that. And these are some of the issues that we're dealing with. They're tough. These are tough business issues when people are feeling this way. We can do audits and assessments and all sorts of things. But the question, again, another question that I'll pose to people on the webinar is, what are you doing right now to address these 7 deadly sins? Because these are holding productivity, performance, effectiveness back. And the end result of it is managers are confused, managers lack the confidence, the courage, the competence. HR are struggling with the paradox I've already outlined. There's a reactive culture prevailing. You know, everything's done at the last minute. Often there's a risk mitigation of reputation. The costs are incredible. You know, there was the Daily Mail headline, was it last week, £10 million awarded to the consultant. You know, we're seeing regularly now high value costs of these. Within the public sector, I do a lot of work in the public sector, of course, settlement agreements are no longer an acceptable way of resolving issues. And if there's one good thing that's happened out of that, it's causing public sector employees to sit down around the table with their employers, to sit around the table with their employees and find more creative solutions, and they're doing that. And I think that the culture of high-value settlement agreements and payouts is actually impeding actually sitting down and taking responsibility. And I welcome with open arms the reduction in the amount that's available to be paid through the public purse for settlement agreements. It's making people sit around the table. But the costs are extortionate and incredible and damaging. So the first poll I'd like to put out here now is to ask you, based on your own organisation, is your organisation's grievance procedure effective at resolving disputes? Now, bear in mind the underline is resolution. Does it resolve issues? Poll, it's a yes or no. On the basis of your experience, does your procedure resolve disputes? I'll leave this open for a little while until everyone's voted. So just to let you know, we've got 185 people on the webinar today. I think we had about 300 or 400 or so register. There's always a dropout, but just so you know, the number of people is fantastic. 185 people on the webinar, this is just phenomenal. So I would suggest that the figures from this poll, whilst may not be scientifically or academically valid, actually are going to paint quite an interesting picture. And as I said, there's a couple of polls that we're going to be able to share with you. So I'm going to keep the poll open. The 70% of you have voted. So I'm going to keep the poll open for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm now going to close that poll. So thank you everybody who's voted. I'm afraid if you haven't done so, you've missed the opportunity, but there will be more. So I can share that with you now. So very interesting. 42% of you are suggesting that your policy does resolve issues, and I'll be very interested in discussing that with you. What's working and what benefits is it having? However, 58% of you, so very interesting figures. That's out of the poll, so circa 100 plus people on the poll, but 58% of delegates on this webinar are suggesting that your grievance procedure isn't effective at resolving disputes. Well, that suggests a time for change, a need for change, and I'd be interested, and please do feel free to share today if there's anything in you, for those of you who said yes, it does resolve disputes effectively. What are you doing in your grievance procedure to encourage that? Have you got mediation embedded into it, or are you doing anything else? Because I think other people would love to learn from you about the experiences. So it's great to hear so many of you saying yes, but obviously a larger proportion are saying no, it's not necessarily effective at resolving disputes. So there's a few tools I'll show you. I'm going to send these all out as well. We've got various toolkits. So one of the things we'll often do with organisations is just run a short diagnostic and do a cost analysis of conflict. So I do a webinar based on building a business case for resolution and mediation. So this is just a very quick overview. But in front of you, you've got 9 questions, really useful questions for HR and ER professionals to think about. So does conflict management feature as a strategic priority within your organisation? How so? How is it stated? We often get upset because our managers aren't dealing with things at an operational level. And as I often say to operational manager, to HR, it's often because it's not seen as a strategic priority. So operational managers are like, well, why should I deal with it? It's not an operational priority either. So first question, is it a strategic priority? Mm-hmm. What's the real cost? We have toolkits. If you're interested, we have toolkits and calculators to help you measure the real cost. How many days do you lose each year to sickness, particularly stress-related or conflict-related? How many grievances do you get each year? How much do they cost? Again, we have a tool to help you measure that. How much do you spend on settlement agreements, tribunals, compensation and legal fees? I was doing a set-up a mediation program for a large local authority, and the HR director approached me and said, David, we had a case settled by our mediators that was definitely going to employment tribunal on a discrimination basis, uncapped award and employment tribunal. I think we might have lost the whole of our mediation program and training for 200 managers was offset by that one case. Quote unquote, one case. Wow. To embed a fully functioning internal mediation program in a large local authority, including management development training. Yeah. And it just, to me, it made common sense. What impact does it have on engagement and satisfaction? How much time is spent by your managers? There are different levels of evidence here, but the CIPD suggests up to 30% of management time is spent dealing with this stuff. Is it impacting our customer experience, and do we train our managers and leaders to deal with this stuff? These are just good questions to be thinking about after the webinar in terms of building your own business case and assessing your own needs and goals. So a number of questions now. The ACAS code will talk a little bit about, would you use resolution policy to incorporate how to manage bullying and harassment claims or just grievance? Absolutely, B&H, bullying, harassment, Trudy, discrimination, workplace harassment, team and group problems, collective disputes. So we run, and I have someone embedded in Royal Mail, we use mediation and bullying and harassment in Royal Mail, and we run their industrial relations framework using mediation. So organisations like Royal Mail now are deeply embedded and enshrining mediation throughout all of their B&H grievance and industrial relations activities. So no, it covers all of those. In fact, it works best in often what we might think of a more complex arrangements. How does mediation meet the ACAS requirement for representation during the grievance procedure? Mediation is one aspect. Catherine, thank you for the question. So a resolution policy, if you have a look at the resolution policy, you'll see there are different stages. So what the ACAS requirement is that the employer at some point needs to give the employee an opportunity to meet with them with representation, a formal process. Mediation in any way doesn't impede that. In fact, mediation can actually encourage that. So use our common sense. If the employee wants to sit down with you and have their case heard, that's absolutely fine, and mediation can support that. But mediation doesn't in any way impede the ACAS procedure. And it's really interesting that people are there's confusion about the ACAS procedure. And I think ACAS need to accept that their policy, their code of practice on discipline and grievance is confusing people about what can and can't be done. I think ACAS would accept and need to start to make a clearer statement to HR professionals that that as long as you follow the minimum code, that's what you're required to do. It's not the dispute resolution regulations, the 3-step modified dismissal and grievance procedures, which some of you will remember, they were repealed nearly 10 years ago. Yet most grievance procedures are echoes of the modified 3-step dismissal and grievance procedures. Someone needs to step up, and I'm urging ACAS continually to do this, to say it's okay to move away from your traditional grievance procedure. So a few other questions. Thank you. They're pouring in now. So let me have a look. So we have a fair treatment at work policy to deal with bullying and harassment and issues, and the grievance policy is capturing anything else. Would you recommend both being streamlined? Absolutely. I think that the split between bullying and harassment and grievance doesn't make sense to me, although I have helped organisations to design them. Bullying and harassment is just a slightly more difficult name for conflict. Mm-hmm. And bullying and harassment, just because people are putting forward the term bullying and harassment, doesn't make it any easier or more difficult for you to resolve. What it actually does is it inflames people's expectations, because if they trigger a B&H policy, the expectation is that they're operating in some statutory environment and the chances of dismissal are greater. in the majority of organisations, the sanctions that are applied by managers through and following an investigation on bullying harassment are less than 10%. And in some organisations, they're around 1 or 2%. So the question isn't about whether or not you should have it as your policy. The question is your policy working, Elke? If your policy is working, you've got high engagement with your employees, high satisfaction levels, and it's doing the job it's designed to do, then keep it. But my experience of the vast majority of B&H policies is actually they create false expectations, they worsen the positions, they give people the impression that the organisation is going to dismiss the employee, the manager, and what happens is Tuesday morning, the manager reappears back in the depot, the office or the unit, and the employee's like, well, I thought you were being sacked. It's like, sorry, I can't discuss that with you, it's subject to confidentiality. That afternoon, the employee signed off for 6 months. Okay, it's not. That's like I say. These are experiences that I have. One needs to look up your own experiences, but that's not right. That's not the best way to run our organisations. David, John, you mentioned changing mindsets earlier. What do you think are the main reasons why organisations don't change and incorporate mediation into the resolution policies? I think organisations haven't stopped to look at this. There's a kind of business as usual approach, and the reason I'm out there taking this message out there is just to try and create a debate and a dialogue about this. And what HR professionals are saying to me is, David, we really value what you're doing because we hadn't even thought to look at it. And I don't think there's a particular negligence or reticence on the part of organisations. I think it's just a case of we've accepted this as the normal. But actual fact, when I go into organisations to mediate or set up mediation schemes, when I'm talking to unions and employees and managers, they're fed up, they're worn out, they're tired, they're disenchanted. And all I'm doing is going back to those people who hold the policy and say, look, let's listen to these people. En masse, they're telling us something. Maybe there's another way. And organisations are, I'm working with an increasing number of organisations who are, gosh, there's lots of questions coming through. It's fantastic. How does this consider malicious allegations made by employees against others? That's a really interesting one, malicious allegations, because from the person who is receiving the allegation, it's always malicious. The person who's on the receiving end, because they never agree.
Yeah.
So who's applying the perception of maliciousness here? I want to listen and understand. And if there's a malicious allegation being raised, it's telling us that something's wrong. You wouldn't just make up a malicious allegation if you were happy at work and you were feeling productive and engaged.
Very true.
So what's the root cause? And we spend too long, is it malicious? Prove it, disprove it. You're right, you're wrong, you're malicious, you're vexatious. This language is getting in the way of actually finding out what's going on for you. And what we really want to do is to sit in a room and have a conversation with you. But what this language does is it almost gives us permission not to sit in a room and talk to you because we've got to go through due process and exercise procedural fairness. Due process and procedural fairness, by the way, are absolutely central to good organisational policies and procedures. But we rely on them and use them as an excuse for not tackling the thorny issues. And we don't allow ourselves to get into a room and have a conversation because of due process and procedural fairness. Let's let some common sense come back to the room. Let's go and talk to people and find out, why would you be making a malicious case? What was your perception? What was going on for you right then when you raised it? Wow, there are a lot of questions. This is fantastic. As I said, I'm probably going to stay on after the webinar and I'll try and answer some of these questions, but they are coming in thick and fast, and it's clearly resonating with a lot of you. So yes, please do keep asking your questions. Clearly time, as always when I'm doing presentations, is not on my side. I'm going to try and answer all of your questions. So Marissa and Laura and Joanne and many, many others who are submitting questions. I'm not ignoring you. I just need to move on, but I will answer them. So here we have it, the model resolution policy. Yes. Is it going to set your world on fire? Probably not. Is it going to change overnight the culture and behaviours in your organisation? Probably not. But does it give you a starting point to have a different conversation, a different dialogue, and a different way of thinking? Absolutely it does. Does it unlock the potential for your organisation to apply common sense in your business and get people talking? Absolutely it does. Overnight, the Lancaster Hotel in London experienced a 75% reduction in grievance and disciplines from the resolution policy, and they are hosting a massive conference next Thursday, free of charge, because they're so excited. We've got Lloyds Bank, Royal Mail, the CIPD, Engage for Success, Institute of Leadership Management. They're all coming in to talk. It's being videoed. Watch the TCM website. We've got people coming in and giving case studies and hard-hitting evidence to say this is now working. So what's different though? What makes it so different? Why is it different? Well, it's a new approach. It's fresh thinking. This is 1970s thinking. No other part of our business goes back to there's a throwback to the 1970s, apart from the grievance procedure. So it's fresh thinking. It's a fresh way of approaching these issues. It's values-based and person-centered. The grievance procedure, any that I've seen, do not reflect the values. I've already said that of organisations. There's an enhanced triage, evaluation and assessment of cases and opportunities for facilitated conversations at a much earlier stage. We're bringing HR in now and try and provide a much greater emphasis on mediation and early resolution. Let's get around the table and talk. It remains voluntary, and again, there are technical aspects of voluntarism, but it remains a voluntary process, but it is the process of choice, and you've chosen to work in our organisation, and our organisation espouses the values of collaboration and cooperative problem solving. It therefore follows that as one of our employees, we have expectations. I'm up to 1,654 reasons why an aggrieved employee shouldn't sit down in a room with the other person. I'm yet to hear a good one. And that's 25 years of mediating. I remember once I was mediating between two neighbours, and one person said to me they were fearful of going into mediation because they believed the other person would bring a knife. That was a good problem, a good issue. So I organised the mediation to happen in a magistrate's court and ensured everyone went through a metal detector before they could go into mediate. Problem solved. Now give me your next problem. There wasn't one. We got around the table, they sorted it out. Every dispute imaginable can be resolved through mediation.
Yes.
If the parties are willing to engage, and I'm yet to hear a good reason why the parties won't engage, other than perception, prejudice, fear of retaliation and recrimination. Well, if your organisation allows people to retaliate and recriminate, then obviously people won't be happy to mediate. Yeah. But what organisation is going to have an environment which actually encourages retaliation and recriminations? We support people, we nurture them, we develop them. And if we're not doing it, then maybe you're not ready for resolution. But this is the kind of thing organisations are really focusing on. The policy also is compliant with the ACAS code. Absolutely critical to mention this. And it also includes practical toolkits, things you can do and implement. It's no longer just a procedural framework, it's about really driving resolution. So the resolution policy promotes and encourages positive relationships and constructive dialogue. It's about leaders and managers walking the talk and engaging with these issues in a more constructive way. And it reflects 5 core values. I'm not saying these, one would need to apply them to your own business infrastructure and framework, but broadly speaking, fairness, mutual respect, the ability to put ourselves in each other's shoes, that emotional intelligence, empathy, dignity and dialogue. Now, I challenge any organisation, whether it's a global blue chip or a small charity fighting its way to get funders, to say that these 5 values aren't important in one form or another. And this is now enshrined in the very procedure that exists to resolve dispute, which, as I said at the start of the presentation, is both ubiquitous and, when managed well, can be healthy. So what does it actually look like in practice? You've got one there in front of you, you can see what it looks like in practice. It has, all policies need to have a flow chart, so a flow chart it does have, but look how simple this flow chart is.
Yes.
I've seen some grievance procedure flow charts that go over 6 pages. I've lost the will to live after the first page. I'm confused. There are so many pathways and processes. This is very simple. You request resolution with one of your key stakeholders. They audit, they evaluate it. You either move into an early resolution stage, which might be a local meeting, negotiation, mediation, facilitated conversation, or you might bring someone in from outside the business or one of your internal mediators. Excellent. 93% of all mediation cases are resolved and reach a written agreement. At Royal Mail, for the first 6 months, well, it was 100%.
That was great.
Amazing, 100%.
Yes.
And that was tough bullying and harassment was solved through mediation. But it can't solve everything. But nonetheless, the resolution options are high. Or there is a case, or appears to be a case to answer. You may wish to take some formal action, suspension, investigation, or a formal resolution meeting. We sit down with our employee, we listen to them, they have the right to representation, they have the right to appeal, but there's always a focus, even through appeal processes, disciplinary processes, and investigations, to get the parties back around the table resolving their issues. So the focus, resolution runs through the process like Blackpool runs through a rock. Whereas in most grievance procedures, there's one sentence that's called informal resolution or local resolution. This is what it's all about. So who does what? Well, the employees and the representatives are required to raise issues early. We can't just sit on it. Mediation will be offered in all cases, but they'll engage and engage actively. that human resources professionals will think differently about their role, think about coaching and mentoring, supporting, integrating mediation, taking ownership of these policies and procedures and really driving the changes that are needed. For our managers and leaders, obviously not all of them make it, as the case there. But engaging in resolution skills training, possessing and being appraised against leadership competences. How many of you have leadership competencies that promote resolution and emotional intelligence? If not, then they need to have them. And that they will foster a culture of constructive engagement and resolution within their teams. The managers play a critical role here, and we need to embrace them and work with them. And even though we might have the Ulrich model and we expect them to do so much, when I speak to managers, they're like, well, no one's told me what to do or how to do it. So Ulrich becomes Ulrich Light or some derivative of Ulrich, because we can't rely on our managers to deliver transactional performance, grievance, discipline, absence and capability, because no one's told them how to do it. No one's whispered in their ear. So these are some of the resolution approaches available through the resolution policy. There's a plethora of approaches, and they are all about resolving the issues. They're not about escalating it from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. In essence, abrogation of responsibility. The best thing I could say about the grievance procedure is it's an absolute abrogation of responsibility. It's about dispute escalation, and I just want to pass it up to the next person who's going to agree with me. And I'll be disgruntled when they don't agree with me, so I'll move it to the next stage.
Yeah.
It doesn't solve the issues. So mediation is at the heart of this. Again, I run many webinars on mediation. We talk about it a lot, Bola. You're training mediators all the time.
I've done quite a few, and I mean, it's transforming in the way you see parties when they come to the room. There are different emotional states when they come to the room, but during the process, you can see the shift that then happens. It's transforming, where parties can start identifying what their key needs are through the use of mediation. They can then identify how they can then present that need to the other party and have a constructive adult-to-adult discussion for the first time based on that particular situation. And during that process, you see how they move from their position and then start seeing how actually going forward, it's better for us not to be in this conflict and work together in collaboration where we can then maximize our potential and actually make the most of why we're employed in a particular organization. And that's the essence of what mediation will bring into this situation.
Absolutely, Bola. And here they are in a mediation process. This is a mediation. That's what it looks like. It's not, there's nothing magical going on. That's what happens in a mediation. But here the mediator is controlling the process. The parties are speaking respectfully. They're talking stuff through. And believe it or not, individuals in conflict have enormous capacity to resolve their issues if we give them the chance to do so. Yes. As I've said already, it's organisations who often are the people who are resistant to putting people in a room with each other. And the outcomes can be enormous, and I've said there's more and more evidence. There's a very interesting piece of research done by ACAS last year, looking at a forensic level at the use of mediation in a large NHS trust in the Northeast. And I'll send that piece of research out. There's more and more evidence. As I've said, we've got a big conference next week with more evidence being submitted. There's research being done. So mediation isn't just now hyperbole and a nice idea. There's evidence to support and underpin its impact on well-being, on engagement, productivity, reduction in time and stress, and anxiety, and the overall cost to the business. I'm even arguing now that in actual fact mediation is a key part of the strategic level decision making, and I'm very interested in aligning mediation into the BS 11,000 standards on collaboration. And I'm working with a large organisation at the moment who have BS 11,000 collaboration standard and the role of mediation to turn the standard into very practical, meaningful, real experience for people in the workplace. So it's not just an operational tool. It's a strategic tool. Conscious of time, Bola, we need to move to our second and final poll. So based on what you've heard, and it's just a straw poll, we're not going to hold you to it, but based on what you've heard, would you consider introducing a resolution policy in your organisation? Okay, so we're up to 60% voted. I'm going to keep it open for another 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So sorry if you haven't voted. I'm going to close the poll now. So some quite staggering statistics that I'm going to be sharing with you here. So for those of you who voted, thank you very much. 92% of you said the time has come to do something differently. 80% of you, and I presume that might be those of you who saw the grievance procedure working well, which makes perfect sense. If it ain't bust, don't fix it. You know, no one would argue with that. But 92% of you on this webinar are saying, hang on. And I can assure you, those of you on the webinar are reflecting some of the highest levels from HR, employee relations, industrial relations, and learning development. We've been very fortunate today to have an incredible delegate list, and I think this reflects that you are now saying, hang on, there needs to be a change in the way that we work and the way that we think. So let's move on. Hopefully you can see the, let me hide that. So finally, really, just telling you a little bit about our little business. We're a fantastic company. We do so much work with organisations. Some of it's behind the scenes, mediating and training. Some of it's high profile. Islington Council, we've just set up their mediation scheme, Kent County Council, big banks, Lloyds Bank, EDF Energy, you know, the list just goes on and on. Marks and Spencer's, the head of employee relations said about TCM, they stand out head and shoulders above the rest. For those of you who know me, you'll know I'm 6'4", so it might have been a statement about my height. And Bono, of course, you're around that same height, so it might be a statement about our heights. But this is what we do. We mediate, we set up mediation schemes, we deliver accredited mediator training, we can come on site and do diagnostics and audits, deep dives, and also our new Leaders 2020 program, which we're launching on May the 25th, is dragging soft skills into the 21st century. So if you've got any issues, challenges, problems or needs, please give us a call. We are absolutely at the top of our game, and we can help you to create that culture of resolution within your organisation. Right, let's just go back to see if there's any final questions. I can't go without having just had a quick look to see if there's anything else. Can I put a caveat on my answer to this? Okay. Are you on social media, Twitter, etc.? Absolutely. LinkedIn, Twitter. We'll send you all of the social media stuff. I'm a bit slow on Twitter, forgive me, but LinkedIn, all over it. So we'll get that out, Katie. Thank you for that. There's other questions. I think I'm going to have to probably come back to some of these. Where you mediate an allegation of sexual harassment and during that process there is an admission that this has happened, do you then take the issue to discipline? No, Adrian, not at all. If both parties have engaged in the process, the chances are through any mediation process that we do, that at some point people will admit culpability for an activity which is in breach of organisation's policies and procedures. And the best example I can give is again from Marks and Spencer's, where the employee relations manager said, David, something was disclosed to me in mediation that under normal circumstances I would have moved and escalated into formal process. I made a judgment call not to. It was the best judgment call I made because it got the parties reconciled and back to work. It's about what do you want and what do you need as an employer. Absolutely. But I've sat in rooms where people have accepted culpability and blame because they're able to do so because it's safe. And people are then able to draw insights and learning from that. And it's one of the most powerful processes. Great questions. Really enjoyed today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for participating. There's LinkedIn. As I said, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I know, Bolly, you are too. Yes. Twitter, Facebook, all the rest of it. We've got all of that stuff going on as well. But for now, I'm going to say thank you so much to everybody today. I hope that you found it useful. There's a little survey that comes up from GoToWebinar afterwards where you're asked for your thoughts and reflections. Please do fill it in. Let us know what you think. We're running these webinars all the time, so if there's something we could do better, please tell us. Or if there's something that's really resonated with you, again, please tell us. So thank you once again, and welcome to the Resolution Revolution. It starts here. Yes. Thank you very much. Take care.